In our headlines on this Thursday afternoon, May 9th, President Yoon addresses members of the media in an unscripted press conference earlier this morning on a wide range of national, diplomatic, economic and social matters relevant to South Korea. And on the local economic front, findings by Seoul Central Bank show Korea's current account logging a surplus of over $6.9 billion in March to keep the account in positive territory for the 11th month in a row. Meanwhile, beyond borders, there are signs of a widening rift between the U.S. and Israel over the fate of Rafah, as the Biden administration pledges American weapons will not be used against the southern Gaza City. We start with details of the press conference held by President Yoon at the Yongsan presidential office earlier on this Thursday morning that ended a little before noon. For more on this, I have our senior correspondent Oh Soo-young standing by live. Soo-young, welcome.
Hi, Sunny.
Right, let's begin with the President's remarks on his policy direction for the remaining 3 years of his term in office. Soo-young.
Right, Sunny. So indeed, during the press conference and his message beforehand, Yoon first reflected on the past 2 years of his administration before looking forward. And given the recent defeat of his ruling People Power Party at the parliamentary election in April, he said he spent a long time ruminating on what he saw as two major failure points of his administration, first being the economy. He said that despite his best efforts to really improve the foundations of the Korean economy, the changes had not been tangible in the everyday lives of Korean citizens. Also, he acknowledged that he had really failed to communicate his policies effectively to the Korean public and engage with them. So on that front, he issued another apology. Over the past 2 years of his administration, President Yoon has focused on making more long-term structural improvements, such as increasing the competitiveness of Korean businesses, particularly in new lucrative high-tech industries such as semiconductors, as well as reforming the labour, education and pension systems, known as his three major reforms, to increase Korea's productivity by removing inefficient practices. Going forward, Yoon said that he will open up an era of supporting the middle and working classes economically and socially. Still, Yoon made it quite clear that the direction of his policies will remain intact. The substance will remain the same, but his style of communication, though, that will change over the next 3 years.
Right. So I hear the President also spoke of setting up a ministry to address Korea's dismal birth rate. Do tell us more.
Right, that was something that was completely new in his message. President Yoon said that he would like to create a new ministry solely for the purpose of tackling the country's chronically low birth rate, which is expected to fall below 0.7 child per woman this year. That would be the lowest in the OECD as ever. And this new ministry, the minister in charge, he or she is also going to act as the Deputy Prime Minister for Social Affairs, and this would mean they would work on policies combining the fields of education, labour and welfare to create more integrated, comprehensive solutions.
Right, and moving forward, so as expected, President Yoon had to navigate through some tough questions, if I may, on sensitive domestic matters, some of which are being addressed at the National Assembly, I believe.
That's right. President Yoon was indeed asked very direct questions about the very sensitive bills being debated at the National Assembly right now, including the opposition's push to put through bills that would open up separate investigations, firstly on the death of a Marine last year, and also allegations, speculations surrounding his wife, the First Lady Kim Gon-hee, and her alleged involvement in stock manipulation, as well as her accepting a luxury handbag from a pastor in 2022. First, speaking about the probe on his wife, he apologized for her imprudent behavior. But then on the bill, he said it was purely he indicated that it was purely a political move by the opposition party, given the fact that an investigation into the alleged stock manipulation case was already concluded without finding her guilty under the previous opposition-led government. He also spoke on the Marine Marine probe case, saying that the current investigation by an independent counsel must be concluded first, and if the results are found to be inadequate, then he himself would call for a special probe.
And Seong, one final question before you leave us. What was shared about future defense initiatives, especially involving American troops stationed here in South Korea?
Right, so there were questions about former U.S. President Donald Trump, now the frontrunner for the Republican Party in the upcoming November race. His recent remarks insinuating that the U.S. may withdraw its troops from South Korea if Korea doesn't pay up, basically, something that his government, when in power previously, had also been pushing for. And well, President Yoon, though, he said that he would not speculate on the future of the US electoral race. He did say that he is confident that the bilateral alliance between South Korea and the US will remain intact, and that this would, based on this, various negotiations or issues, they could be resolved amicably. He said that there is strong support for the bilateral alliance from the US Senate, House, and both the Democratic and Republican parties. And having emphasized the central role of Seoul's trilateral cooperation with Washington and Tokyo, Yoon also indicated that he will continue strengthening relations with Japan while acknowledging their historical differences. He said they need to cooperate in more elaborate ways to respond to North Korea's nuclear weapons, as well as for economic cooperation and for the interests of the global community.
I see. All right, Seong, thank you so much for that coverage. That was our Presidential Office correspondent, Oh Seong, reporting live from Yongsan. In other news, Korea's current account remained in the black in March with a surplus of almost $7 billion. Our correspondent Moon Hae-ryun has the latest numbers.
South Korea's trade balance logged a surplus once again as chip exports showed a robust recovery and energy prices fell. Preliminary data released by the Bank of Korea on Thursday showed that the country's current account balance came to $6.93 billion in March. This is the 11th month in a row for the account to be in the black, following a surplus of just over $6.8 billion in February. With this latest data, the current account balance in the first quarter of the year recorded $16.84 billion in total, a notable rebound from the negative figures seen in the first quarter of 2023. The goods account tracking imports and exports experienced a surplus for a year as semiconductor exports jumped by over 34% compared to the same month last year.
Goods exports centered around chips and IT products rose for 6 straight months, while goods imports with raw materials such as oil, gas and coal continued to decline.
Data also show that outbound shipments of electronic goods increased by around 21% year-on-year, while exports of chemical goods dropped by over 11%. Another key reason the goods account maintained a surplus was lower import cost of raw materials due to falling energy prices. The value of gas imports, for one, fell by nearly 38% on year, and the value of coal imports dropped by more than 40%. This led to an overall decline of imports by 13.1% compared to March last year. However, the services balance, which includes earnings and spending on overseas trips and transport, was in the red by $2.43 billion. The travel sector in particular recorded a deficit of $1.07 billion, but that's lower than the previous month's tally, which the BOK explained as more overseas travelers visiting the country. Meanwhile, the primary account balance responsible for monitoring foreign workers' wages and overseas dividend payments reported a surplus of $1.83 billion. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Korea's household debt to GDP ratio fell below 100% for the first time in over 3 years during the first quarter. According to the Institute of International Finance, the ratio stands at 98.9%. Researchers there are linking the fall to 3 years of tight monetary policy. Still, they point out Korea ranks number 1 in terms of household debt relative to GDP among 34 countries. Corporate debt, meanwhile, was 1.2 times higher than GDP in the first quarter. Meanwhile, the government is exploring the option of permitting doctors with foreign licenses to practice medicine here in Korea during times of severe healthcare vacuum. Our Cho Soo-young covers this intention and the response from the local medical arena.
The medical dispute in South Korea is reaching a crisis point. The health ministry announced on Wednesday that it plans to allow doctors with foreign licenses to provide medical services here. But this will be limited to when the healthcare alert level reaches serious as it is now due to the walkout. The ministry gave official notice of a revision to the medical law, stating this was to address the shortage of doctors that is creating a healthcare gap. The ministry will accept opinions on the revision up until May 20th, while an exact implementation date has yet to be determined. However, the Korea Medical Association, the country's largest doctors group, criticized the decision right after the official notice, alleging it would bring about a huge decline in the quality of medical services. Meanwhile, the academic board at Busan National University, 320 kilometers south of Seoul in Busan, and Jeju National University decided not to revise their internal regulations on increasing their medical school quota. The board said that, as there was no social consensus regarding the increase, they would keep the number of new students at the current levels. The Education Ministry expressed regret over this, as the majority of university medical schools had already completed changes to their regulations.
While other universities have either completed or are smoothly progressing with a revision of their regulations, the ministry regrets the situation at Busan National University. The Education Ministry urges the university to complete the regulatory revision process, following its demand for an increase in medical school enrollment.
The ministry warned that if the university fails to revise its regulations, it could face a suspension from medical school admissions in 2025. The medical crisis is growing as the collective walkout by trainee doctors to protest the government's plan to increase the number of new medical students has lasted for almost 3 months. The medical authorities are concerned that there will be a shortage of new specialists next year, as junior trainee doctors won't be able to finish their training and take specialist exams the following year if they are absent for more than 3 months. The authorities said around May 20th is the deadline for these doctors to return to their hospitals. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
Indonesia has asked for a substantial cut in its share of cost for a joint fighter jet development endeavor with South Korea. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung has more.
South Korea seems likely to accept Indonesia's recent proposal to cut back its financial contributions to the joint KF-21 fighter jet development project. The two countries had agreed to jointly develop the KF-21 from 2015 to 2026, with the South Korean government covering 60%, the manufacturer Korea Aerospace Industries contributing 20%, and Indonesia contributing another 20%. The expected total amount in investment was approximately 8.1 trillion won. However, Indonesia has offered to cut its payment to about a third of the original amount. This means instead of 1.6 trillion won or $1.2 billion due by 2026, the Indonesian government would only pay about 600 billion won.
We are reviewing measures in line with our national interests, considering the timely development of the KF-21 fighter jet, the impact on defense resources, and defense industry exports.
The Defense Acquisition Program Administration explained that the offer would be accepted under the condition of providing Jakarta with fewer technology transfers. If the proposal is approved, South Korea will need to secure an additional 1 trillion won or $732 million. However, the agency said the amount has been reduced by half through cost reductions that were made during the development process. The decision is set to be finalized in late May to prevent any delays in the jet's development project. Indonesia's commitment to the project has long been questioned as it missed payment deadlines, contributing just around 300 billion won so far. The proposal comes amid an ongoing probe into alleged attempts by Indonesian engineers to steal the jet's technology from Korea Aerospace Industries. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The Biden administration appears to be using its leverage over weapon shipments to Israel to try to influence the course of the war in Gaza. Our Shin Se-byuk explains.
U.S. President Joe Biden said the U.S. would not supply weapons to Israel, which it could use to attack Rafah. In an interview on Wednesday, Biden said that while Washington is still committed to Israel's defense, his administration was not going to supply weapons and artillery shells that would be used in Rafah. The move is a clear statement against Israel's recent ground operation in the southernmost city in the Gaza Strip. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, speaking before the Senate Appropriations Committee the same day, confirmed the temporary halt of the weapons shipments.
As we have assessed the situation, we paused one shipment of high payload munitions.
He stressed that Israel should not launch major attacks in Rafah without ensuring the protection and safety of civilians in the conflict zone. Secretary Austin also noted that a final decision on whether to proceed with the shipments has not yet been made. The weapons were reported to include 1,800 2,000-pound bombs and 1,700 500-pound bombs. This confirmation by a senior U.S. government official follows several reports of the temporary suspension amid disagreements over Israel's actions in Rafah and marks its first public acknowledgement of the decision. State Department spokesman Matthew Miller, in a briefing on Wednesday, also acknowledged the suspension in response to Washington's concerns of a major operation in Rafah by the Israeli military.
And we also have concerns about the impact of any potential operation on the delivery of humanitarian assistance. So we have paused one shipment of near-term assistance, and we are reviewing others.
The Biden administration's decision has reportedly prompted Israel to warn that it could endanger talks on hostage deals. According to U.S. media outlet Axios on Wednesday, senior Israeli officials have expressed deep frustration and dissatisfaction with the White House decision to delay the weapons shipments. Reports also suggest that Israel is outraged not only by the halt of the shipments, but also by the leak of disinformation to the press. Israel has also cautioned the U.S. that this decision might jeopardize efforts to negotiate a ceasefire and secure the release of the hostages. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
Elsewhere, Russia pounded Ukraine's power grid in a major bombing raid this week, while the EU agrees to use profits from frozen Russian assets for Kyiv's fight against the Kremlin. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
A day before Russia's Victory Day, celebrating the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany in 1945, its military conducted its largest attack in weeks against Ukraine. The Russian military carried out massive attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure on Wednesday, using 55 missiles and 21 drones launched from either Russia or Russian-controlled areas. The attacks targeted power generation and transmission facilities in 6 regions of Ukraine. The overnight attacks resulted in at least 3 civilian casualties, as Russia's military continues its recent attempts to paralyze Ukraine's energy system. Meanwhile, ambassadors of EU member nations on Wednesday agreed to use windfall profits from Russian central bank assets frozen in the bloc to further aid Ukraine's defense. According to Reuters, citing EU diplomatic sources, the bloc will use some $300 billion of Russian financial assets that the G7 countries froze in 2022 over Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. Upon approval of its legal text, 90% of the proceeds will go into an EU-run fund for military aid for Ukraine, while the other 10% will support the war-torn country in other ways. The decision comes despite Russian officials last month threatening the West with a severe response and endless legal challenges if the frozen assets are touched. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
North Korea's Kim Jong-un has sent another letter to his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin, this time to mark the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. According to the regime's official newspaper, the Nodong Shinmun, on this Thursday, Kim voiced his unwavering support of what he described as Russia's sacred cause to protect its sovereign rights. This latest letter follows a similar one earlier this week to congratulate Putin's 5th inauguration into office. U.S. trade authorities may decide to either reject or restrict any smart vehicle technology related to China over its potential risks to American security interests. Our Jong-un has more.
On Wednesday, U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo issued a warning that the U.S. could potentially ban the use of Chinese technology in connected cars, which are smart cars linked to surrounding networks. Raimondo cited security threats, as the technology requires the collection of large amounts of data of not only personal users, but also information on U.S. infrastructure. She said that the most extreme action would be to completely ban Chinese connected vehicles in the United States, but there could be mitigation, including implementing safeguards or new tariffs. Without detailing a timeline, she said that the department needs to digest all the data before making a decision. In February, the Biden administration ordered a probe into electric vehicles made in China to investigate whether imported connected vehicles pose a national security threat, naming 6 countries, including China, as foreign entities of concern. The Commerce Department responsible for conducting the investigation said it would review public comments that were due by April 30th. According to the U.S. Department of Commerce's Federal Register, the South Korean government filed a letter of opinion on April 30th. The letter requested a more precise definition of connected cars, saying that the current definition was too broad. The statement also said that the uncertainties of the potential regulatory policies and timing of its implementation could lead to significant burdens on the industry. The Alliance for Automotive Innovation, a trade group representing most major automakers around the world, also submitted a letter on April 30th, saying that while the automakers are committed to appropriately minimizing risks related to Chinese design systems, it would be very difficult to find new suppliers for their existing hardware and software components. Jong-un, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. In France, the Olympic flame arrived on French soil on Wednesday, 79 days before the Paris 2024 Olympic Games opening ceremony. The Olympic flame safely reached the French port city of Marseille after a 12-day journey from Greece on board the Bellum, a 128-year-old 3-masted ship. French swimmer Florent Manadou, who won gold in the 2012 Olympic men's 50 meters freestyle, was given the honor of being the first torchbearer on French soil. Manadou then handed over the torch to Paralympic athlete Nantenon Keita, a 400 meters gold medalist at the 2016 Rio Games. Marseille-born rapper Jules then lit the cauldron in front of around 150,000 people, signaling the start of the Olympic torch relay celebrations, which will continue until the start of Paris Olympic Games on the 26th of July. A Boeing 767 cargo airplane landed at Istanbul airport on Wednesday without its front landing gear, dragging its nose on the tarmac. The Turkish Transport Ministry said authorities have launched an investigation while no casualties were reported. The FedEx Airlines cargo plane was doused with firefighting foam as it came to a halt on the runway after sparks and smoke were seen from the nose of the plane dragging on the tarmac. The plane flew in from Paris and reportedly informed Istanbul Airport's control tower that its front landing gear had failed to open. The Turkish Transport Ministry said in a statement that the cargo aircraft landed with guidance from the control tower. FedEx said they would provide additional information as it is available. The aircraft in the incident was less than 10 years old. The Garrick Club, London's historic private members' club, voted to allow women to join for the first time since it was founded in 1831. Members of the all-male gentlemen's club reportedly voted on Tuesday on whether to allow women to join, and almost 60% of those present were in favor of doing so. The Garrick has caught the public's attention as its members are all prominent figures in society, including King Charles III, senior politicians, judges, journalists and actors. Previously, in 2015, a vote was held to consider the acceptance of female members, but it was rejected at the time. Women were only allowed to enter the club as guests and were denied full membership. Kim Seong, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. While temperature swings continue today in most places, certain parts of the country had single-digit morning temperatures, but highs are rising rapidly to the 20s, going up 1 to 9 degrees higher than yesterday. And those in Gyeongju could notice gaps of about 20 degrees Celsius today. Sunny skies expected nationwide with stronger UV rays for southern regions in Jeju Island. Have your sunglasses and a hat ready to protect yourself from these strong UV rays. The capital area should be as mild as yesterday at 21 degrees. Daejeon, Chuncheon, Gwangju will see a high of 23 degrees Celsius. Again, there's a big rise in highs for southern regions at 22 degrees in Busan. Air quality will be decent nationwide. Then pleasant late spring weather is expected for Friday, but nationwide rain is in the forecast for this weekend. But sunny and warm weather is in store for next week as the roses start to bloom. With that in mind, let's take a look at the international weather conditions.
And those are the headlines at this hour here in Korea. Coming up next is our daily panel session, so do stay with us.